Hey guys, I'm Becky from Book Bite Reviews, and welcome to my magical April wrap-up. If you watched my April TBR, you will already know why this wrap-up is so magical, and that is because I participated in the O.W.Ls Readathon with G from Book Roast. In my TBR video, I did wear my beautiful Hufflepuff sweatshirt showing off my house pride, but that was when I was on my way to take my exams. Now exams are over, it's time to go home, so I put on my street clothes. This readathon is a month-long one, and the challenge is you get 12 prompts for 12 different classes where you'll be taking your O.W.L exams. For each class, there is a challenge to read a book with a certain thing. So some of them are title related, some of them are cover related, and some of them are content related. And your challenge is to complete all 12. Or there was this beautiful handy-dandy career guide where you could choose a wizarding career and it would tell you what books were mandatory for you to pass in order to become that career later on in life. I personally decided to take both challenges, so I picked a career which was a ministry worker, and I also decided to try and read all 12 books as well. Now, did I succeed in passing the classes I needed to in order to try and become a ministry worker? We will find out. For my wrap-ups, I normally tell you what books I read in order from least liked to most liked, but because of this magical readathon, I'm going to do it a bit different. So first we will start with the books that were mandatory for me to read in order to pass my mandatory classes in order to become a ministry worker. Then I will talk about the books that I read as a bonus, and then I will talk about the couple of books that I read for no good reason. So first let's start off with my mandatory books. In my TBR, I did say that there were only 5 mandatory books for me to read, but actually there were more. So the way that a ministry worker works is that there were 5 books that you had to read in order to become a ministry worker. But then you have to decide which department you would like to go into, and so that would have an extra book attached to it. For me, the extra class that I needed to take was Care of Magical Creatures, which was to read a book with a land animal on the cover. For that one, I decided to read Under the Moon by Myracle. Now, I did read this book, which means I passed the class. However, I did not enjoy it. Unfortunately, this book is getting 2 stars from me. It is honestly a mix of things for this rating. For one, I feel that these superhero, graphic novel, young adult retellings are geared towards people who are already fans of the DC world, and it is not geared towards creating new fans. So I am like somewhere in the middle. I know about them. I've seen some of the movies, seen some of the TV shows, but I'm not like a super fan. I don't know everything. So for me, I did feel a little bit lost at times, more so with the one that I read last month, which was Mara Tidebreaker. But with this one, I was a little bit more knowledgeable, which was good. However, I did not connect at all with our main character. She was very whiny and very unrealistic with her expectations of people. And the really sad part was that she knew she was being unrealistic and didn't try to change it. So I already didn't like her. And then there was something that happens very early on in the book dealing with an animal that was very traumatic for me, honestly, and it threw the entire book for me. And that happens, like I said, right in the beginning. It's like how Catwoman becomes Catwoman, basically. And it honestly, like, really, truly traumatized me. I was very affected and very upset by it. And I kind of wish that there was a trigger warning for it. So it completely threw the rest of the book for me, even though nothing like that happened later on. But I just really couldn't cope with it, and it just threw the book. So I normally would still rate the book a little bit higher if the rest of the book was okay, but the fact that our main character was just so bad, it's just gonna go ahead and get a 2-star for me. The next class that I needed to pass was Charms class, which was to read an adult novel. And for that, I read Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shannon McGuire. This is book 2 in the Wayward Children series. If you have not picked up the series, I do highly recommend it. It is very interesting, very dark, and although it is about a home for peculiar children, it is not intended for children to read. In this one, we follow Jack and Jill when they went into the portal for the very first time, and it was very interesting, but I just didn't feel that enough stuff happened in order to get a 5-star rating from me. I will be in the very near future making a rating video to explain my ratings and what gets a 5-star to what gets a 1-star, so that'll clear it up for you. But a 4-star is still very, very high to me, so yes, it is very enjoyable. It's just not over the top amazing. For Defense Against the Dark Arts, I needed to read a book that started with the letter R, and for that I decided to read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is book 1 in the Raven cycle. I feel that this book is like a staple in YA books, and I had not read it. It's been on my shelf since I think before it even came out. It needed to get done, and I did really, really enjoy my time with it. My only drawback was that I didn't really connect to the looking for a lost king piece that's in this book. I'm not into those kinds of books regardless, so that kind of threw me. And I do feel that the ending of this book is a bit rushed, and I don't think it fully explains a whole lot to us. I understand that this is part of a series, but I strongly believe in the philosophy that even if a book is part of a series, each book should stand up on its own, and I don't feel that this book can stand up on its own. It's very strong, very interesting, and I have pretty high hopes for the rest of the series. But for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4-star rating just because I did feel like it left me feeling a little bit short, but at the same time, it has gotten me very excited to continue with the series. The next class was History of Magic, which was to read a book that was published at least 10 years ago, and I found a very fitting book for that, which was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. As I have mentioned many of times, Goblet of Fire is my very favorite movie of all the Harry Potter movies. This is my first time reading the Harry Potter books, and so I did expect that this would be my favorite. Unfortunately, it was not. I still highly enjoyed this book. It does still get a 5-star rating from me, but I do think that I enjoyed book 3 just a tad bit more. So book 3 is now officially my favorite in the series thus far, but I did really love this book. I loved all the stuff that is different from the movie. I loved the alliance to try and free house elves and give them rights. I enjoyed this so very much. I am still just as confused about the whole Mad-Eye Moody thing. I just don't understand why he was so nice to Harry. I also want to mention that in the movies, I think we see Sirius Black one time, and he is just all over the place in this book. So very interesting. If you have not read the Harry Potter books, but you love the movies, I highly recommend that you read the books. If anything, just start with book 3 because books 1 and 2 were very well adapted. Everything else, I still love the movies, but there's so much more information in the books and stuff that was just completely left out. Read the books. For Potions class, it was to read a sequel, and for that I decided to read Volume 3 of Amulet by Kazu Kibuishi. Since this is Volume 3, I will not go into too many details, but basically this series is a juvenile graphic novel series about a girl who finds out that she is a stonekeeper, which means that it is up to her to protect the world, pretty much is how I'm taking it so far, and she has unlocked some secret powers by becoming the stonekeeper. I personally really love this graphic novel series. I think it is just so much darker than I was expecting. It's so good. The art style is amazing. As you can tell, this author is also the one that does these beautiful Harry Potter covers. So needless to say, I do love the art, but this is just such an unexpected graphic novel series that I was expecting to like, but I wasn't expecting to love. But I was thankfully surprised, and I'm really enjoying it. This one is another not surprise, honest 5-star rating from me. If you haven't checked out this series, definitely do. And the last class that I needed to pass was Transfiguration, which was to read a book with a red cover. For this class, I decided to read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Abertalli. Guys, I am so mad at myself over this book because I waited so darn long to read this. I don't even know how long it's been out, but it's been out for a good chunk of time, and for whatever reason, I just didn't pick it up. I always intended to. And finally I did, thanks to this readathon. And it was amazing, you guys. This book deserves every single stinking award that it has won. It was so freaking good. So, shocker, it is getting 5 stars for me, but I absolutely love this. It was so cute, so heartwarming, so funny, just so freaking good. And even the movie was good. I watched the movie like right after I read the book, like a day or two after. Lately, all movie adaptations have been like real bad to me as of late. They've been just changing a whole lot lately and just making it a whole different thing. So I had 0 expectations for the movie, but thankfully it surprised me. They do change a whole lot, but I still really, really enjoyed it. So 2 5 stars going out for this book for both the movie and the book. There is a TV show coming as well, so very excited about that. But yes, 5 stars from me. So what does that mean, guys? That means that yours truly is on the right path to becoming a ministry worker. Yes, I did it. It was a lot of tough work, but I did it. I'm so very happy. I am not officially a ministry worker yet because I still need to pass my newts later this year. So now let's move on to all the classes I took as a bonus. The first class was Ancient Runes, which was to read a retelling, and for that, I attempted to read Rapunzel's Revenge by Shannon and Dean Hale, illustrated by Nathan Hale. This book is a teen graphic novel, which is also a Western Rapunzel retelling, and unfortunately, this book was all kinds of no for me. I really could just not get into the whole Western feel of it. It felt very cheesy and all just very wrong, so unfortunately I did have to DNF this book. In order to still try and pass the class, I attempted to read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This would have been a reread for me as I have read it before, but unfortunately, I just did not have time to read this book. Ancient Runes, I failed. The next class was Astronomy, which was to read a book with the word star in the title, and for that, I attempted to read Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. Unfortunately, I also did not have time to read this book, so Astronomy was failed as well. Arithmancy was the next class to take, and that was to read a book that was written by more than one author. And for that, I read The Curiosities by Maggie Stiefvater, Brenna Yovanoff, and Tessa Gratton. This book I did finish, and I am giving it 5 stars. This book is a bunch of short stories from all 3 authors, and it also has annotations from each of them commenting on each other's work. I found it so very interesting. I loved almost every single story that's in here. The only ones that I did not really like were the King Arthur books, but I'm not into those kinds of books anyways, as you guys could probably tell from the Raven cycle, but everything else I did truly love, and I do wish that the short stories that are in this book were full-length novels. This is another book that I've had on my shelf since before it came out, as this is the advanced reader copy, and I have never read it, so I'm very, very thankful to this readathon that I did finally pick it up. For the divination class, it was to read a book that is set in the future, and for that, I picked Phantom Wheel by Traci Deebs. Now, I did read this book all the way through. This book is about a group of teenagers who are all cyber hackers. They are asked by the FBI to compete for a college scholarship by using their hacking skills. Unfortunately, it is not the FBI who asked these teens, and there are no scholarships to be won. So the teens find out that this was actually a ruse by a high-up tech company who owns a social media site. Kind of sounds like Facebook, to be honest with you. And they find out that it is a ploy to basically create a cyber apocalypse. So the teens band together to try and stop this from happening and save the world. Now, I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. However, once I got about 75% of the way through, I realized that this book is not set in the future at all. It is just about saving the future. So, even though I finished it, it was a giant fail for the readathon. In order to try and correct that fail, I decided to read The Giver by Lowry. This one I decided to listen on audio since I have never listened to the audiobook of it, and it was so, so good. I gave this book 5 stars. The last time that I read this book was the first time that I read it, and that was back in 8th grade, so it's been quite a long time, and I honestly do not remember loving it as much as I did after rereading it. It was so, so good. I'm so happy that I did so, and yeah, just amazing. For herbology, it was to read a book with a plant on the cover, and for that, I tried to read Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. Unfortunately, I got about 50% of the way through this book, and I realized that I was just not enjoying this at all. I could not connect to the characters. I didn't really care about the mystery. I didn't really care about who did it. So I decided to DNF it. I honestly kind of think that I didn't connect to the characters because of the audiobook. The narrator wasn't bad, but the way that she portrayed some of the characters, I don't think I would have read them with that kind of voice or attitude if I would have physically read it. So it kind of threw everything off for me, and I think that's why I didn't connect with the characters, but I honestly don't care enough to attempt to read it again, so I DNF'd it, and I do not plan to go back. I was reading it for the Books with Friends read-along, but after watching quite a bit of their live show discussing it, they all, for the most part, enjoyed it for the most part, and what they talked about liking it just didn't seem like a good enough reason for me to pick this up later. So unfortunately, goodbye, Truly Devious. I will not be revisiting you. In order to try and still pass herbology, I decided to replace it with The White Rose by Amy Ewing. This one is book 2 in the Lone City series. Book 1 is The Jewel, and holy cow, you guys, this book was so good. Definitely a 5-star reading for me, for sure. I enjoyed it so very much. It is so much more action-packed than book 1. So much happens in this. It has another giant cliffhanger ending, and oh my goodness, I just cannot wait to read the last book. And the last class that I needed to take was Muggle Studies, which was to read a contemporary. And for that, it was my book club pick, which was All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. This book was way more darker than I was expecting, but it was, again, another pleasant surprise. I did really enjoy this book. Overall, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The only problems that I had with it were I was very emotional over that ending. I wish it would not have ended that way, and I do wish that there was some more options for help brought up in this book. Some of the options are brought up, but at the same time, the characters didn't take any of them. I understand that's pretty realistic though, but I don't know. I just had very mixed feelings with this book towards the end. I really enjoyed it until like the last 50 or so pages. A lot of dark stuff happens. If you do have any trigger warnings for suicide or suicidal thoughts, I definitely do not recommend this book for you. It was very dark. It did cause a very healthy and therapeutic discussion in book club, which I really appreciated, and it sounds like so did all of my members. So that is very good, but just know that you do have to be in the right headspace for this book, and I did enjoy it, so I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 out of 5 stars. So that is it for the magical books that I read, so let me go ahead and put my wand away. There were 2 other books that I decided to read this month that were not part of the readathon, and the very first one was to finish Blackmail Boyfriend by Chris Cannon. Now, this book started out very strong. I really enjoyed this book up until about the 60% mark. Our main character was very strong and feminist, and I really enjoyed the plot line of blackmailing a guy to be your fake boyfriend to try and help your reputation. But after the 60% mark is where this book took a giant nosedive. I initially started reading this book at the end of March, and at first I did not realize why I stopped reading this book, but once I finished it, I realized why, and that was because I think I kind of felt the way that this book was going and just didn't decide to finish it. So it was kind of bothering me that there was only like 30 pages of this book left, so I decided to go ahead and finish it, and it was just so bad. Unfortunately, our great female main character, who was feminist and strong, just totally changed and warped into somebody that she was not in the beginning. She was trying to change but not change herself for somebody, and it was just really bad. I felt like the ending was super duper rushed, and the giant plot point of trying to get him to love her. It honestly should have happened at the 50% mark. They should have had their big breakup like they planned. That should have happened about halfway throughout the book. And then the second half should have been the whole realizing that we have feelings for each other bits. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. All of that happened in the last about 15 to 20 pages. So the pacing was just super duper rushed and it was very cheesy, very bad, and I honestly was not convinced that either one of them had true feelings by the end of it. I think that they liked each other, but I definitely don't see this relationship lasting longer than a few months. So needless to say, this book that I was expecting to be giving it a 4-star is now a 2-star book for me. And finally, the last book that I decided to read this month was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This one I decided to reread this month for the Daughter of Smoke and Bone Readathon, and I originally gave this book 5 stars when I first read it. After rereading it, I am going to go ahead and knock it down 1 star. So this read, it is getting 4 stars instead of 5, and mostly that's just because I feel like it does have quite a few problems with the relationship, and I finally realized why I never finished the series when I first read this years ago. Pretty much the way that I see it is the way this book ends is pretty depressing, and it just made me not want to go on. Even after reading it for a second time, I got that same feeling, which is why I realized why I never moved on. I remember giving this book 5 stars. I remember loving the writing style of Laini Taylor. Her writing is just so artistic and beautiful and flowery, and I love it so very much. But the ending of this book is just so depressing, and I didn't want to go on. Thankfully, after watching the live show for this book where our co-host discussed it, I am now inspired to go on and read book 2. Unfortunately, as you guys know, I did not have time this month to read it, but I have already started it for May, and I'm really liking it so far. I'm gonna go ahead and give this book 4 stars. So overall this month, I believe I read 12 or 13 books, which is crazy good. I am very proud of myself for my progress during this readathon. There were 2 books that I DNF'd, and I did replace them, which I'm very happy about. There were 2 that I did not have time to read, but that is okay. They were not mandatory books, and I did read all 6 books that were mandatory in order for me to try and become a ministry worker. On top of all that, I still also read 2 additional books. So I don't know what I was thinking, but it happened. I do want to say a very big thank you to G from Book Roast for putting on this readathon. It was so darn much fun to participate in. I loved it, and I cannot wait for the newts later this year, and I cannot wait to continue to do these in the future. If you participated in this readathon as well, be sure to leave a comment below telling me how you did and telling me what career you chose and if you accomplished it. If you did not participate in this readathon, still tell me how your reading went this month. If you enjoyed this video, which I hope that you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you loved this video and you want to see more from me, go ahead and hit that subscription button. And if you want to be notified as soon as my videos go live here on YouTube, hit the notification bell. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!